Good evening, everyone, and welcome. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And now I hand it over to Jerry Boyd.
Thanks. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. First, I'd love we can do some introductions, please.
Yes, Ducia Lubovskaya, commission member from Mission Hill.
Good evening, Patricia Mendez, Architectural Access Specialist, City of Boston, Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities.
And I'm Jerry Boyd. I'm from West Roxbury, and I'm also a commission member.
I'm Kristen McCosh, the Disability Commissioner and ADA Title II Coordinator for the City of Boston.
And on the phone we have
Kyle Robidoux, a commissioner member, and I live in Roxbury.
Great. And since we do not have a quorum, we'll have to dispense with the approval of the April minutes. Now we have a presentation from the City of Boston. Stacy Corcoran from the Office of Public Health Preparedness.
Hi, good evening. That was perfect pronunciation, by the way, so thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy Corcoran. I'm the Director for the Office of Public Health Preparedness. We're an office of the Boston Public Health Commission, and I'm happy to be here today to tell you a little bit about my office and tell you about some of the projects that we've been working with the Disabilities Commission and some other City of Boston programs on. So first, to start off, part of the reason why I'm here is I really hope that we can start a dialogue where you can really help inform how we engage with both this advisory board and with the disability community in Boston. So to do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our office and the scope of the work that we're doing, so you kind of understand what we focus on and what we're really prioritizing in our work. So in terms of our strategic direction, a couple of things that we really focus on. One, we really want to make sure that our community is going to fare better in an emergency. So that's the entire City of Boston and all of our residents. We also want to ensure equitable access to health and human services, both during and after an emergency. So again, we're focused on outcomes following emergencies. In terms of our vision and mission, we really focus on connected systems. So you'll hear us say that a lot. We focus on bringing partners together and collaboration, whether that be, again, at the partner level, community level, but really thinking about systems level as well. And we talk a lot about resilience, making sure that people, places, systems are resilient to emergencies, and specifically emergencies that are impacting health and access to healthcare. So three areas that we really focus on. One is we're the public health authority for the City of Boston. So again, the Boston Public Health Commission. In my office in particular, we serve as the emergency managers for that work. So any of the different 40 programs that we have at the commission, we're the emergency managers, making sure the critical programs can stay up and running during an emergency, and that if they're impacted in any way, we get them back up and running. And we also write the emergency plans, et cetera, for all of those programs. We work really closely with public health and healthcare partners in Boston, so wide range of things. But ultimately, again, that's all to make sure that our community is faring better during an emergency. The final thing that we do, so we're really connected with the City of Boston Office of Emergency Management, and our office is really focused on the public health and healthcare response and recovery to emergencies. So again, we're plugged into the larger city organization, but we're really the leads for making sure that public health and healthcare services, if they're impacted during an emergency, we either get those services back up and running as soon as possible, or we have some plan for continuity of those services and make sure there is no disruption or minimize that health impact to any of our residents. So that's a little bit of background overview of what my office does. There are a couple of projects that we have focused on and that we've partnered with the Disabilities Commission on in the past. So two of those, one, we worked together on a training for workers who would be working in an emergency shelter, for example. So if one needed to be stood up because of some type of emergency, we actually worked together on that curriculum so that we could train the people that would be working in the shelters on how to support all of our residents. And then we work annually together on the Abilities Expo. So the past 2 years, we've been able to put on a workshop for on emergency preparedness at the annual Abilities Expo. So we've been happy to partner on those 2 events. One of the events that or one of the projects that we're working on right now that I want to talk to you guys about is the Extreme Temperatures Response Plan. So this is a project that's really focused on how the city of Boston and our partners are going to respond to both extreme heat and extreme cold. A lot of the genesis of this project came from the Climate Ready Boston report, the City of Boston Resilience Plan, and the Imagine Boston 2030. So there was a lot of data and a lot of research that showed that both during extreme heat and extreme cold events, health is severely impacted. So we wanted to make sure that we as a city had a really coordinated plan amongst all of the City of Boston agencies, but that we were also looking at the response holistically. So we were reaching out and working with our community-based organizations. We're working with private organizations. We're working with other partners in the process, and that we had a plan that was actually written and showed how the coordination was happening. So this project is going on right now. We started working on it at the beginning of this year, and it's about a year-long project, so we hope to be completely wrapped up with it by January. In the meantime, though, we do hope to have a pilot plan ready for this summer. There's already been a lot of reports saying that we can expect a warmer summer, so we're really hoping to have a plan that we can all follow and all sort of test out during the summer months, and then we'll work to refine that and have it again in place for the winter months when it comes in play. So far, we've met and worked with 10 city departments, many more that we have meetings set up with and that we're looking to engage with. We actually just held a kickoff meeting, I believe it was last week, where we had around 37 attendees representing lots of different city organizations. Again, really thinking through and brainstorming who is it that we're working with, who are our constituents, how do we serve people right now, what are the gaps in our ability to serve, and what do we need to do in order to fill those gaps, whether it's working with community-based organizations or some of these other partners that we haven't traditionally engaged in the process, or are there things that as a city we need to focus on and do better? We want to make sure that the process and the plan, everything is inclusive, especially to our most vulnerable populations and our most vulnerable residents. The mission for the Boston Public Health Commission is to protect, preserve, and promote the health of all of our residents, especially those who are most vulnerable. We're trying to do that through an equity lens, so we are also working as part of this process with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and the Mayor's Office of Resilience and Racial Equity. So again, we're really trying to work with all of our city departments to make sure this is a really holistic, really strong plan for all of us. So we need engagement and input from as many partners as possible into the plan. Sort of phase 2 of this plan, once we have created it, what we're really looking to do and what's actually been identified through a lot of the conversations that we've had with partners is that we need to do better at messaging. We need to make sure that we have a much more coordinated City of Boston messaging, and that we make sure that not only is it more coordinated, but that the messaging is also culturally and linguistically appropriate, and that it can be delivered to residents in a way that can be accessed by everyone. So again, it's something that's been a pretty strong theme that we're working with everyone to make sure that we're addressing as we develop the outreach materials and develop materials that are, again, going to share with everyone what the plan looks like. And so, like I said, it's an ongoing discussion, ongoing process. Certainly if there's anything that the advisory board has in terms of ideas on ways that we can better engage with you or engage with the disability community on this plan, we'd be happy to. We're certainly going to continue our partnership with the Disabilities Commission on this work. So that's all I had. Now I guess I
Thank
can
you.
Open up for questions.
Any questions from the commission?
Yes.
Sure.
Hi, here's again Ducia. I have a question. You mentioned about your preparedness and linguistics. I'm curious, do you do quarterly trainings for employees for emergency situations? Like when you have, I mean, there are various people with various disabilities. Some people are deaf, or others have or language barriers or mobility issues. Do you have any employees who get trained in what to do, or if like a worst case scenario or equivalent? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for your question. Again, my office, I think we really focus on working for that type of training. We do have training that we offer. We do trainings on all sorts of topics related to emergency preparedness. And when we do, they are really focused on our whole community and thinking about whole community needs. In terms of employee training, so we do training primarily for Boston Public Health Commission staff. Like I said, we partner with the City of Boston's Office of Emergency Management. So, we've partnered with them in thinking about different types of trainings that, and making sure that the trainings are really comprehensive and include ways, again, to serve all of our residents. So there isn't necessarily a quarterly training. I think we actually do trainings more often than that. If you think about specific staff and employees who have to work and support certain, different types of processes or plans. So, for example, I mentioned the shelter training. So the Boston Centers for Youth and Families employees, for example, get that training pretty regularly. So,
Can I add a few things to that? Only because I've been here. Maybe.
Yeah.
How long have you been with the BPHC?
since 2005.
Okay, so you've been here a while too. Longer than me. But I do know that maybe I've been involved with some other projects with BPHC.
Yeah.
That maybe you weren't aware of, but we also did a complete assessment of all the emergency shelters,
Yep.
which are located at Boston Public Schools and community centers. So that was a very comprehensive, like $1 million project that we did when I first came on, 2010. And then also we did trainings on food, on people with different dietary needs, people with disabilities, medication storage, service animals. We've done, pretty thorough training as far as like adding to the curriculum, which goes out to people when they're bringing new staff on to work in the emergency situations. We've also partnered on things like communication. And I know the big message that the BPHC has in terms of dealing with people with disabilities is that they want to ensure that every system that they have is normalized for people with disabilities, that they're not isolated, they're able to be with their families, with their caretakers, they're able to make the experience of any type of emergency equitable for people with disabilities the same as it is for everybody else. So I know that's a real priority, and we appreciate that, and I know that message is throughout all the upper levels, which trickles down to the lower levels.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission members?
No questions.
I just had a kind of a basic question myself. This is Jerry. So if there's like a snow emergency and a person with a disability can't get out of their residence or is having trouble accessing, a shelter or whatnot, what would they do?
So, I think there are a couple different things that would happen in a scenario like that. I think if there's a medical need, certainly, EMS would help with the transport. 311, calling 311 is the connection to all the city departments. So before we, when they're planning calls that happen at the city level for any of the snow emergencies or any of the other big weather-related emergencies, 311 is certainly a part of that, and they're connected with all of the other city agencies. So if a need came about and people had trouble accessing the shelters or getting to the shelters from their home, we would use city resources to make that connection to then
We're on
help
those
get
calls as
people
well.
there. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And we did have an incident similar to that a few years ago. It wasn't snow, but it was a fire at a generator in the South End or Back Bay. And we did have a constituent with a disability who was on like the 5th floor and couldn't access any way to get out of the building. So I know that like the Elderly Commission went around and did door knocks and tried to link people up if they needed PCA services, if they needed like phones and things like that. So we do have our eye on situations like that.
Sure.
And certainly coordinating all the departments, I think, is a big.
But when you
big
talk
help.
about emergency preparedness, I assume that that's the type of a scenario you mean. So everybody
Yeah,
has,
absolutely.
everybody has to be coordinated.
Absolutely, yeah. And, we also have in the planning process, we have access to data for anyone who has some sort of medical device or medical need, especially electricity dependent devices. So if there is a power outage, for example, in a particular area, we can work as a city to do wellness checks on folks to make sure, especially if it seems like it's going to be something extended. So, we try to do all of that sort of in the pre-planning phase, and then we pull that back out during the response and make sure everyone's well aware of this is what we're going to do if this situation happens.
And I can just say, as a staff of the City of Boston, just our work with the Public Health Commission is very intentional towards people with disabilities. It's always a priority, and they seek a lot of input from our office. So we really have a good relationship working together.
Just a follow-up question. Would you recommend that people with disabilities like self-identify if they have like equipment, and who would they identify that to or whatnot?
So we don't have a registry or any sort of registry for the City of Boston. I know there are other jurisdictions in other parts of the country where they do have registries. We don't have anything like that in Boston.
We looked into it at one point. There was we got some money to do a study to see if it would be worthwhile.
Sure.
And we collaborated with other cities that have it, and it didn't seem to be the most useful way to identify people, because it's very dependent on who gets the message to identify, and they move, people move frequently, and how do you keep it updated. So the last thing we would want is for someone to, like emergency personnel, to go to a home and then have someone with a disability who didn't live there, and just like, ineffective resource.
Sure.
So it's a tough one.
Yeah,
But definitely people can self-identify with EMS, like
definitely.
Stacy said, for ventilators or anything that's electricity dependent.
I think the other thing is, as part of our community resilience work, when we're out talking to people about how to be prepared, we always tell people that connectedness and, either knowing your neighbor or knowing others who can do some of that advocacy for you and can assist in an emergency. We always try to tell people to connect, again, with community organizations that can do some of that advocacy and some of that assistance. So, I think, again, it's just a matter of part of that community resilience piece of it.
And speaking of that, I know Patricia was in contact with someone about a training for people with disabilities on emergency preparedness. Did you make a contact recently?
Yes, and that was a follow-up from a regional meeting with the Massachusetts Commission for Persons with Disabilities, that we got in contact with a federal resource, and we're planning a training coming up after July. There was the agenda was, the schedule was full, but I think after July we might start scheduling something for the community.
We'll loop you in on that too.
Yeah, that
so
would be
stay
great.
tuned.
Great.
Yeah, and when we're doing, again, I mentioned we do community resilience trainings and work on that, where we're always trying to be out in the community as much as possible to share that information. So we try to make sure that our materials are, as much as possible, are translated into multiple languages. We have large print versions of materials. We have things translated into Braille that we try to bring out to our events. And when we do our events, we also focus on caretakers and making sure caretakers understand emergency preparedness and really understand what some of the city resources are to access information and access resources should they be needed.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the audience? If so, could you make your way to the podium?
Oh, I can be heard. I'm Jim Farrow.
It's for the camera.
The question was, if you have a building, a big building, like the building
Jim.
that John is in.
It's just for the camera.
We need you to speak into the mic for captioning, please.
Right.
Okay. A building like the building that John is in, it's huge. It's, 14, 15 stories. And it has a large number of residents. Has there ever been any kind of actual in-place drill to see whether or not you have all of the kinds of things together to handle a building like that?
So again, we haven't done that type of drill from the Boston Public Health Commission. However, I know that our public safety partners, for example, the Boston Fire Department, Boston Police Department, and Boston EMS, they often will drill and do emergency preparedness drills in these type of environments, these type of buildings, to make sure that they can safely evacuate people. So, they've made investments in different type of equipment that would help them evacuate people safely if an elevator was out and someone wasn't ambulatory. So there are a lot of different things that, again, that some of our public safety partners who would actually be supporting that evacuation that they do.
Any other questions from the audience? Well, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. Next, we were going to have a presentation from Jim Weiss of the Boston Breakers. I know he's had some transportation issues, though. I know there is a representative from the Breakers here. I don't know. Do you feel comfortable speaking?
I think Jim was going to be delayed, but he may
Okay.
be still here, so.
It's up to you, whether you want.
Again, my name is Jim Farrow, Boston Breakers. No, I'm not really too comfortable speaking because Jim had something prepared and it was organized
Okay,
and it was
well,
thought out.
Do we want to wait then?
But
We
I
can wait.
do know that.
Jim, we can wait. We can wait.
Okay, if you can have someone else come again, and then if he isn't here by
Sure,
to the end, I'll do
Yep.
do what I can do.
no
All
problem.
right, thank you.
All right, we'll have our development presentation in the interim from Sarah from the Disability Commission.
Hello, board members. I'm Sarah Leong with the Disabilities Commission. I am the Architectural Access Project Coordinator, and I'm here today to talk to you about the City Hall Plaza Events Accessibility Checklist that you can find at your desk, or there are several copies on the table near the door. So the events checklist was recently launched by the Commission to better support the inclusion of persons with disabilities at events hosted on City Hall Plaza. All events that will be on the plaza for more than a day or have significant built structures like tents or kiosks are going to complete the survey and turn it into the architectural staff at the Commission. The checklist requests some basic information about the event, such as the expected location, attendance, contact information for the event coordinator, as well as if there's a speaking program, the consideration for ASL and CART translation. Additionally, questions about physical accessibility may require a sign-off by a mass professional engineer or architect to sign off on the event's built structures to ensure compliance and accessibilities for ramps, kiosks, tables, and things of that nature. And the aim of the checklist is to provide clarity about accessibility items during the review process and to raise awareness to event coordinators that events hosted on the plaza are required to be architecturally, programmatically, and communicatively accessible to all visitors. So far, the Commission has received about 3 checklists since the launch of the form. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the commission? From the board?
So
John?
what happens if
No questions.
John has a question.
what happens if I fill this out and I put no?
Then we'll send it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the point of this really is to ensure that anything that's going to be on the plaza for more than a day and will be fully accessible. And the reason why we're making that time frame is because most things that are only going to be there for a day are usually just tables or tents, and all the tent companies pretty much know the ADA specs. They do this for a living. But when we have people who come onto the plaza and build their own structures, like just for an example, like Hub Week last year built a lot of structures. We recently had a model home built on the plaza that was constructed just by an architect or a contractor. So if it's a built installation with ramps and sheds or buildings or domes or anything of that nature, we really want to ensure that it gets the whole assessment of architectural access. So the point of this is to make sure they think about it early, because Sarah and Patricia get involved in this at the planning stages. So they're already looking at things that are coming in September. So we have plenty of time to go back and forth and make sure they know the requirements and that they meet them. And I know that all the other city departments are on board with this too. I was at a meeting earlier with Inspectional Services, and they know about it. Property Management, which oversees the plaza, they know about it. And the mayor is certainly on board with all this to ensure that it's an equitable experience for everybody who comes to City Hall.
Did the event that's out there now, did they get a chance to complete this checklist?
The patios?
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
And I think we caught a few minor issues with that, and we were able to rectify them.
Yeah.
That's great. I was here a little bit earlier today, but I didn't get a chance to check them out. So I look forward to soon. Any other questions?
I would like to make a comment and maybe answer your question a little bit more. So if they say no, and we see that they don't have information or they don't have awareness of the issues, we bring them in and encourage them to meet with us. And then we explain where we're coming from, we explain the regulation, and we explain our expectations. So we always encourage them to come and talk to us. Meet with us.
And you said so far there's been several organizations that have been receptive to the checklist? That's great. One thing that I did notice when I was here earlier was that the picnic tables right outside, they don't seem very accessible. Because I got something for dinner, and I was trying to access a picnic table to eat it, and it wasn't very easy. So I didn't know who handles those, and maybe if those could be changed, or if people are aware that those aren't very accessible.
We did talk about that. I know that I raised the same issue with the picnic tables, and we'll follow up about that one. But I know that we asked for accessible seating to be dispersed, because some of the round tables would be more accessible. They have high top tables,
Yeah.
which can be difficult for people. So we'll follow up on that.
Great. Any questions from the audience?
No questions? Oh, no.
Sorry, Kyle. I keep forgetting you're on the phone. I apologize.
No worries.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the I don't have anything for an interim chair's report, so we'll move on to the commissioner's report.
Thanks, Jerry. So I'll start my report with a reminder that our Disability Community Forum is this Wednesday from 2 to 4 at the Copley Library. And we are looking forward to a great event. If everybody wants to spread the word throughout your networks, it's really a chance for us to listen to the community and get feedback about what you want us to work on, what's working well, what we need to improve. And there's really no agenda other than for us to listen. So we encourage everybody to attend and let us know what's on your mind. And that actually, I should say, that event is hosted usually by the advisory board and myself, and it's a chance to meet other elected and appointed officials as they're available. I know that Chief Martinez from the Health and Human Services Cabinet is planning to come towards the end of the event, if his schedule allows. And the board will be coming, hopefully. And hopefully, on that note, I want to let people know that hopefully by the June meeting, we will have new appointees at the board. The holdup has really been logistical. We haven't been able to find a place where we could actually meet with 13 members around the table because we can only fit about 7 or 8 at this table. So we think we figured out a solution, and we're planning to be meeting in the city council chamber on the 5th floor, which is, it's all done over, it's fully ADA compliant, and it's nice because it just happens to have 13 desks for the city councilors, so everybody will get their own seat. So that is the plan for June.
Sounds
Knock on
very
wood.
cool.
So we're very excited. We got a lot of good applicants, and we're looking forward to really rejuvenating the board with some new ideas and new members. Another thing that we worked on this month was we had a meeting with the Boston Transportation Department to follow up on some constituents' concerns about bike riding in the city of Boston, on the streets, on the sidewalks. So it was really good timing because BTD is in the process of writing up some rules and regulations on bike riders that's going to be inserted into the BTD rules and regs book. So right now, unbelievably to us, there was no mention of bikes in the BTD guidelines. They talk about vehicular traffic, which is automobiles, scooters, but no bicycles. So the bicycles now that will be covered will be regular pedal bikes and then also electric bikes, which are different than electric scooters and mopeds. So they have very clear definitions of each one. And it's really unbelievable how complex the rules are, different for mopeds versus electric scooters. Some can be driven on the sidewalk, some can be parked on the sidewalk. So it's really pretty complex, but once that's all ironed out, we will bring that to the board, and we can actually invite someone from BTD to a meeting to come talk about bicycles, because I know it's been a big issue. So that is in the process, and we'll try to get somebody to come soon to talk about that. My next update is on the accessibility priority survey. I think everybody knows that we're working on this. And to date, we have just crossed the 600th survey, so we're really excited about that. The survey is open through ADA Day, which is July 24th on City Hall Plaza. So we encourage people, if they haven't taken yet, to please take the survey and let us know what your biggest barriers are in the city of Boston. And that's all my updates for now. So I would like to just turn it over to a new addition to our office, a temporary addition to our office. He is a fellow from Moldova. His name is Jan, and I'm going to let him say his last name for me. Jan would like to come up and just talk a little bit about the work he's doing in our office.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you and to introduce myself. My name is Ioan Schidu. I am a lawyer from Moldova. I am here for a 5-week fellowship in the Commission for Disabilities here in Mayor's office. I have my work experience in Moldova is mostly related with the implementation of Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities for at least 5 years. I have also worked in different projects related to monitoring psychiatric institutions and as well other places where people, on the other hand, could be kept without their consent. But of course, I'm not making a parallel between those two different types of institutions, but according to OPCAT, to the Optional Protocol to Convention Against Torture, these institutions might be monitored by that body that I was a member of. So here my purpose of my fellowship actually is to learn about the good practices that the Disability Commission is implementing here in Boston. And I think that I have a lot to learn and to maybe to provide to my colleagues from Moldova that unfortunately don't have many tools and platforms that I see implemented here in Boston. I think that one of my main objectives here is to learn how could I implement those good practices that you have here in my country, and I will start probably. We will start with the project of creating maybe the same sort of structure or department in our majority in the capital city, and of course the same platforms of communication with constituents. What I think that they're of the most relevance in order to keep up to date the decision makers regarding the necessities and the rights of people with disabilities that live in the communities. So I am at your disposal to give you any additional information. It would be my pleasure and my honor to give you more information about myself and to be able to keep in contact with you. So I'm at your disposal. Thank you, Commissioner, for giving me the opportunity of...
Can I just ask a little bit
of course.
What the specific project that Jan is working on is doing a human rights assessment of our work in the Disability Commission. And is there anything specific that you've found, anything interesting that you can point to?
I would, of course, there are so many interesting tools that I see of interaction with people with disabilities by the Disability Commission. And I see that the Disability Commission is doing a lot of work in order to reach to other departments and agencies of the majority in order to mainstream or to create more accessible services to the population of Boston. My main focus in Moldova, and maybe I would just point out, maybe if this would be relevant here, to try to maybe to assess the different assess the information regarding the beneficiaries of different types of services that the majority is providing on the basis of disaggregated information. I mean, when it comes to people with disabilities, we have at least several types of disabilities, and we, besides the types of disabilities, that people with disabilities come from different backgrounds when it comes to ethnicity, to social background, when it comes to race, etc. So it would be interesting you have developed so many tools in order to bring more access and to create social inclusion. So maybe it's time now to monitor a little more disaggregated your results in order maybe to see what would be more efficient tools in order to reach out to all your constituents. But I'm saying again, you're doing an incredible job, and maybe you can forward it a little more by measuring who exactly is benefiting and who might not benefit in the same way as other groups. But it's incredible job. So this what I'm saying, this is just another level of work with in human rights field, which not really there is like just few maybe countries that are doing this worldwide. So it's a very innovative thing.
Jan gave a training to my staff and the staff of the Health and Human Services for the City of Boston, which was very enlightening. And one thing that I learned from the training was I always think of the social model of disability in my work, and that's what I bring to it, to ensure that society is accessible and the burden, quote unquote, isn't put on the person with the disability to make things accessible, but it's really society's responsibility. But one thing that Jan kind of opened my eyes to was the human rights model, in that it's not just about making things accessible, but it's really about pride and individualism and people being valued for everything that they are. Even though I thought that way, I never really applied it as a model to my work. So I really appreciate that Jan, opened that lens to me, and I will definitely use that in my work moving forward.
Thank you, I appreciate it, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Jan.
With my pleasure, I'm at your disposal, thank you.
Great.
Next, we'll have the Architectural Access Report by Patricia.
Excuse me, I got a public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, questions for me?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Vieira. I'm from Hyde Park. Commissioner, thank you for having that discussion with the Boston Transportation Department about the bikes. I know I'm repeating myself again, but Chapter 85 of Mass General Laws have some specific rules about bikes, such as no bike riding on sidewalks in business districts, no parking your bikes on public poles or inappropriate places in business districts. The Boston Transportation Department can write all the rules it wants, but if the Boston Police Department doesn't have an enforcement procedure to be able to, in some way, sanction bikers that are doing inappropriate things, then all the regulations in the world are totally useless. I had an email interchange with Captain Dan Alecki from the Boston Police Department a few weeks ago because there was somebody who had their bike chained up right at a crosswalk, literally blocking the ramp coming off the street to the crosswalk. This is something that is not new, and if your work with the Boston Transportation Department can have as an adjunct some police training to bring the Boston Police Department in line with these regulations, I think that would be very helpful. And the one thing on scheduling, I know we have the event on Wednesday. We have this meeting tonight. I'm wondering if in the future we could possibly schedule these things so that they do not take place in the same week as a commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was a great comment.
I can say that we have spoken to BTD about doing some public service campaigns about bike riding, obeying the rules, and we have not talked about reaching out to the police, but one thing that we do need to look at is enforcement. I'm not sure who is responsible for enforcement, if it's the police, if it's BTD, or but we can look into that as well.
I'll give you Captain Dan Alecki's contact information.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Go ahead. There's a comment from John.
Commissioner, I also, I know some other cities and towns are moving to dockless bicycles. And according to the Globe, that's something that Boston is looking at for the future. I would definitely ask you to urge the city to stay with bike docks. I think it encourages a more responsible behavior. And I can tell you, as somebody who works in Malden, where they have implemented dockless bikes, it's already started to see them in appropriate places, blocking ramps or blocking sidewalks. So I would encourage Boston to stay with its current alignment.
Yeah, everything I've heard from BTD is that they are not heading towards dockless bikes.
I'm sorry, they're not what?
They're not going to be embracing dockless bikes. Have you heard of the dockless bike share?
I have not.
Dockless bike share is, there are several companies that are doing it now. It's a new initiative that's happening. Basically, the bike share that we have, all the bikes have to be returned to a dock and locked in place. But there are companies now who can institute technology that just locks the bike itself. So anywhere. It can be left anywhere. So we hear reports from, they're blocking, not only tied to a pole blocking things, but they're just left in the middle of the sidewalk. They can be left literally any place. So right now the city has a relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So Hubway has actually changed its name to Blue Bikes. And I believe that's an exclusive relationship. So they're not looking at bringing in any other bike companies at this time or any time in the near future. And they share the same concerns.
Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we will now move on to the architectural access. Oh, sorry.
Jim called and said he looks like.
Okay, we'll do that after the access report. Go ahead, Patricia.
Good evening again. My name is Patricia Mendez, Architectural Access Specialist. I just have a few updates. We've been working in collaboration with the Public Works Department to develop a one-pager similar to this document, a one-pager with our information on curb cuts and especially pedestrian curb ramps at pedestrian crossings, and where our commission stands in terms of the regulations and the rationale for the regulations. The City of Boston officially encourages the design of perpendicular pedestrian curb cuts at pedestrian crossings for reasons of pedestrian safety, especially with the long winters and wet conditions and the high traffic of our intersections. This document is going to be part of the Public Works Department standards, and it's going to live in their website. And then after that, that one-pager document is going to also live in our website. So they're going to be linked, and they're going to be updatable and with the current information, with our regulations and with the intentions of the regulations, which is pedestrian safety. The next one, I attended the regional meeting for the Massachusetts Commissions for Persons with Disabilities, and we got great information. And as Commissioner mentioned earlier, we're going to schedule some trainings. The first one may be the preparedness training, and then there's two different kinds of trainings for CAM trainings. One is more basic and the other one is more advanced. So in the following months, I'll be updating that with real.
Can you say what CAM is? Community Access Monitor.
Thank you.
Community Access Monitor.
Community Access Monitor. All right, next is the Architectural Access Board public hearings. The next one is going to be in Hyannis on Thursday, and this is the last public hearing of a series of 5 or 6 hearings throughout the state. After that series of meetings, there's going to be a period of the subcommittee meeting and voting whether adopting or massaging the language according to that public feedback. That's probably going to happen around the summertime. So in the fall, there's going to be an additional hearing, which is required by law to have the final comments. And after that, at the end of the year, hopefully these regulations can move forward for implementation. Then we just had our Architectural Access Board training last Friday, and it went very well. And Director Hopkins was happy with the turnout, and we're thinking about doing it again next year if everyone agrees.
It was a great training.
And I'd like to thank Commissioner and the staff of the office. Everyone helped me with the organization. So thank you, everybody. That's it for me.
I just have one follow-up point before, if anyone has questions for Patricia. The checklist that we created for the City Hall Plaza, it is actually a really good model. Like Patricia mentioned, we're going to use it for a few things. And one thing that we're also working on is making a checklist for other city departments that are hosting events. The ADA has a very involved checklist for public events, but it's like 20 pages, and we feel like it's something that people probably won't do without a lot of nudging, and it takes some skill to be able to do it. But if we can get the basics down and at least make sure it's, accessible for the most, for the most part, I think that's going to be a big step, because we do still hear questions and concerns about, for instance, we had a meeting scheduled last year at a Catholic school that wasn't accessible. So we need to at least let the other city departments know that these are the basics that you have to do when you're having a public meeting. So I think this is a really good model. It started with the checklist we developed for the old BRA for buildings that were being newly constructed or renovated. It's an accessibility checklist, which is very in-depth, because that's being filled out by architects and developers. So we scaled this one down for City Hall Plaza, and now we're going to be adapting it for different uses. So we're actually excited about that, because it's easy to fill out. So people will be required to do it and then send it to us so we can give feedback.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, you may want to put on your checklist that this is not necessarily mean you're meeting your obligations under law. This is like a bare minimum that the city of Boston requires. And for further information, please see.
That's a great suggestion.
You don't want them to come back at you and say, well, we met what Boston asked for, so therefore we covered ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think that's a great point, John. Thanks for bringing that up. Patricia, could you just comment again on what the public hearings down in Hyannis, what is that for again? I'm sorry.
Thank you for your question. The Architectural Access Board regulations that we're using right now, the current ones, were last updated in, I think, 2006. So on the last decade or so, it has been improved and upgraded. The graphics of the regulations have been updated, and there has been reformatting and clarification on a bunch of chapter. So this new version, the rewrite of 521 CMR, would be a great update for the regulation, and we are all for that. We're very happy that this is finally happened after a process of 8 to 10 years. So the public hearing are the effort of the board in capturing comments from the community, from professionals, from owners, from building officials that suggest, great points and great clarifications. So it's a very important part of the process.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Any other questions for Patricia from the board? Kyle, I don't want to forget you this time.
Nope, no questions, but thank you.
Any questions for Patricia from the public, please?
And I have an additional comment that I forgot to say.
Okay.
So I have leftover printouts from the training about reviewing variances for the Architectural Access Board. I have a few leftover copies that I'm happy to share right now as party favors.
Great.
If anyone wants.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll have a presentation from Jim Weiss of the Boston Breakers, a wheelchair accessible soccer team here in Boston.
Speak into the microphone.
This is a treat, an accessible microphone. Wow, how is this? We good? Okay. Well, thank you all for putting up with my adventures on the ever-ending MBTA ride. A little bit late, a little bit longer than late. So my name's Jim Weiss, and I'm here on behalf of Boston Self-Help Center, which I chair the board at Boston Self-Help Center. And I'm also the team representative on the Boston Breakers. And I'm here with Jim Farrow, who is my sidekick in these adventures, never-ending adventures of trying to create more opportunities for folks with disabilities to participate in recreation and sports. And so we were both hoping to seek your advice, seek your support in how do we expand sports and recreation in the city of Boston. So first a question, where do you go to find out about sports and recreation if you have a disability and you live in Boston? Now, I'm also a director of disability services, and I don't want this all to be Kristen, because I know where I work, for the most part, it's, oh, go to disability services. Are you an expert on sports and recreation?
Not really.
Okay. If you were, then I'd be in trouble. But usually if you go, so where do you go to find a lot of information? The internet, right? So if you go looking up adaptive sports and recreation in the city of Boston, you're going to find Spalding Rehab. You're going to find the DCR and their programs in Massachusetts. Good programs, good resources. But you're also going to find other towns like Brookline, Lexington, Burlington, Springfield that have adaptive sports and recreation coordinators, directors, usually through their Parks and Recreation department. Makes sense, right? Where else would you go? We've got great parks in Boston, great resources. But and I think a lot of other people want to do more than watch and enjoy, but participate. Now I see John, who played power wheelchair soccer. That's what the Boston Breakers is about, power wheelchair soccer. Jerry Boyd and I are still on the same team, playing and about to go to nationals out in Indianapolis. But how do you get exposed to these adaptive sports and recreation unless you have trained resource people and resources that you can navigate? And so Jim Farrow and I, through Boston Self-Help Center, we've been working with the Breakers, the soccer team, for about 6 years. And we've had good success working with the Tobin Community Center, but we've also wanted to expand the soccer program, but also, I mean, I guess I personally want to try other things. What are those other things? I'm not sure. I never played soccer before. I didn't know anything about power wheelchair soccer till folks came out and did a demonstration, and 10 or 15 folks came out. That's what somebody who knows adaptive sports and recreation would be coordinating with these other agencies, with these other groups, and maybe with, I always get it wrong, is it Children and Family Services? No, Boston.
BCYF?
Yeah.
So they've got the gymnasiums and all, and we also have out in Brighton a YMCA, but why not have somebody in the city that you can go to and find out about resources and maybe do some programming? So I told Jim I was going to say something about bocce. He was like, don't say anything about bocce. Well, there's guys up in Vermont, Scott Goyette.
Yeah, who used to play soccer.
I've got pictures on my phone. They've got accessible bocce. It's accessible bocce. I've gone down to the courts in the North End. I'm Italian. The courts are up high. I had no idea. He's down level ground, and it's kind of like if you went to a bowling alley and you've got some sort of a track, you can have this track, you push the ball down, or you take the sack and kind of toss it a little bit.
I never heard of bocce.
What's that?
I never heard of bocce.
Oh, you never heard of bocce?
Yeah.
Uh-oh,
That's
now
new.
I'm in trouble.
No, it's good to know.
So if you go down the North End, down, where is it? Down along
Opposite Cops Hill Terrace on the back there.
Yeah.
I think I know the park you mean.
So you toss something out there and you toss a ball out, but it's a game, right? It's something you can do. But there are other games. I mean, when I was at UMass Boston, and some of us were at UMass Boston, guy Nils Jorgensen, was hired half-time to do adaptive sports. He would ace bandage a hockey stick to my arm, and a group of us would play some sort of floor hockey in the gym. You know, what would stop somebody from doing fencing, some other kinds of activities? One of the things that drew me to look for alternatives than the Spaldings and the other folks is that I wanted to do something that didn't require me to get out of my chair. So we have a sailing program, great sailing program. I don't want to get out of my wheelchair. And when we talk about architectural access, sometimes we talk about, well, a lot of times we talk about, well, it's not accessible if you have to be lifted out of your chair. You make a choice in sports whether or not you want to get moved or not moved. I'm looking for, and I think there's a whole group of other folks looking for some things that are quote unquote maybe for folks with more severe disabilities. I can't do wheelchair basketball. I'm not going to be able to do quad rugby. Takes too much physical strength and ability. Something that you can wheel the chair around, something that, you know, the accessible bowling, those are things that we could do, I could do, others could do. But I think it's time to look at how do we get some sort of point person, full-time, half-time, whatever it is, to start the process. And Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything. I know we want to leave time for folks to ask questions too, but sure, please.
I see it as a quality of life issue for people with disability. I see the need to assess what's available. Jim and I and Jerry have been doing this for 6 years, and I haven't seen anything in terms of sports and recreation. It just needs to be seriously looked at, and you as an advisory board could really help facilitate that process, and I think that's really what we're looking for. Thank you.
I can make one comment. I know that there was somebody at BCYF who was really interested in this, and he worked there for a long time. Ryan, do you remember Ryan? We met with him years ago. I can't remember his last name, but it was kind of his project. But then when he left, it didn't necessarily land with somebody else. So I think that we can certainly look into the possibility of making it a piece of somebody's job, at least to start. Somebody to, you know, maybe look into it, like you said, explore what's out there. That would be something that, you know, we can look into asking BCYF about. I know they have wheelchair basketball. I know that the community centers have that. I don't know a lot else about it. Yeah, Jessica may know. She's involved with adaptive sports.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Hi there. I'm Jessica. And I just want to piggyback on what the commissioner was saying. We work extensively with BCYF, and under BCYF's relatively new leadership that they've had over the last year or two, one of the priorities that they're really making is starting a task force that is specifically looking at accessibility both within the sites and within the programming for people with disabilities. So I know that they have just started ramping that up and doing an assessment of what they currently have. And I believe as part of that, once they do what they currently have, they'll move forward on building off on it.
And do you know what else the city has? I know they do wheelchair basketball at some of the sites. Do you know of anything else?
I want to say that they have some sort of adaptive swimming as well, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's different groups come in to use the facilities in the city. I know the Boston Public Schools have some different, like Access Sports America comes into some of the schools. They do some swimming, they do some water sports, but I don't, again, like you said, it's kind of not all in one place.
And I know Easter Seals has like accessible martial arts and stuff, but like Jim said, it would be great to have either a point person or people, you know, somewhere where you could gather all these resources together.
Well, I know that Cherie Peliquin does it at IHCD. Not Cherie. I can't think. Shanine. Shanine, do you know Shanine? Do you know Access? What's the name of that group? Access Rec Boston. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Sure, yeah. So Shanine is a big community partner of ours. She runs Access Recreation Boston, which is a partnership between, I think, IHCD, they involve Spalding, and what they do is they try and link all of the resources that are within the Boston and I believe the state for the most part, but really concentrating on Boston and the greater Boston area and kind of making it a resource for Access Rec. They host a conference every year with
I think
sports
two.
providers.
I think they have one
Yeah,
in
I
the spring
think-
and the fall. I think is it coming up or did they just
I think
have
it
it?
just happened in April, so they
Okay.
they hold a couple socials for the members of, if you are a member of Access Rec Boston, specifically as either an individual or as an organization. They hold a couple socials a couple times a year, and then they hold a big spring conference as well. And so they kind of are at least have taken it upon themselves to be kind of the clearinghouse for all recreational sports within the area. They've got a pretty comprehensive calendar of events and where, and you can sort it through disability, you can sort it through sports, you can sort it through area. So we work with them extensively too.
Yeah, and it,
Jim and I have been out to theirs, and we've also been out to the DCR's Brighton Fair. We've played soccer out in the street to demonstrate. So in some ways, there are kind of two items that I'm looking at. One is the city and its resources, being able to coordinate those for all folks with disabilities. And then I'm also kind of looking at my own interest and probably other folks who may have similar needs that a lot of other things just don't fit. Again, the quad rugby, I couldn't push over to John, if I was in a manual chair, let alone get flipped around or something. So, and I'll do some yoga and stuff at work, but it's not adapted. Now I know BCIL's kind of dabbling with trying to do some
yoga.
adapted yoga and all that, but again, having that one point person who's got that, wearing that hat, and not having it carry over to your department, but right in the right place at the right time, then people can, I think what Jim was saying about doing an assessment, assess what people are interested in, and just have a person that someone could call and work with, network with, and,
I think it's good timing because, as Jessica said, BCYF is doing kind of some strategic planning on their programs, and they're looking for input from us, so from all the departments. So this is something we can definitely bring to them. And if the board were interested in writing a letter, we could give you the contact person to send it to.
Oh, yeah. I definitely think we could do that. Accessible recreation is very important. Any questions for Jim or further comments from the board?
I would move that the board send a letter to Surveyor, asking specifically what the department is doing around recreation for citizens with disabilities in the city of Boston, and ask that they come to one of our meetings and talk about it.
I'll second that.
I like the idea of the letter.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
great, thank you all for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
Jessica has a comment.
Sorry, my apologies, board. I just wanted to clarify for administrative purposes. Is a board member offering to take on the writing of this letter, or would you like our office to write this letter and then send it to you guys for approval?
And I'll work with you on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you
Great,
so much.
thanks.
Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
I think the audience has some questions.
Any questions from the audience again? If you could make it to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mary Ellen Gambon. I'm from West Roxbury, and I just wanted to see if it would be inclusive of people who weren't in wheelchairs as well. I know I used to play a lot of basketball and street hockey, but I'm missing half of the muscles in my ankles and my knees, and I have epilepsy. So if I could either borrow a chair to play the hoops again, it would be great, or if there was some way I could do it at a slower pace. I would love to be athletic again.
Sure. Well,
I wanted to see if it would be inclusive in that
That's a great
means
point.
as well.
yeah, I definitely think that when we say accessible recreation, we mean accessible for everybody, not just folks in chairs.
Oh, of
So-
course. And I know at Spalding Medford, I tried to do yoga, and they said, well, the elderly people have access to the tables, but you have to get on the floor. And I said, well, I can't get on the floor because I can't move that way. And they said, well, too bad. And I said, well, I'm here for physical therapy too. I think you know that I can't do that. And they said, well, too bad. You already paid your $70. So I'm just tired of the discrimination that I faced in that regard just because I look fine.
I know one of the programs we have in the schools, or we were trying to get into the schools, was track programs for people who are students who are blind. So I think it's definitely something that we are aware of, but it would be good to call it out specifically in the letter.
So I just wanted to thank you for your appreciation of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Hearing none. Do we have any old business?
Nope.
Kyle, anything you wanted to bring up? Old business?
No, no old business or new business.
Old action items? No old action items? Any new business from the commission or from the public? Hearing none. Any questions from the public?
I'm not going to get up to this, but what is the time of the disability expo on the plaza in July?
Just repeating the question for the captions. The question was whether or not we had a date and time for the ADA celebration on the plaza.
It is July 24th. It's a Tuesday from 12 to 2.
12 to 2, thank you.
And one thing I forgot to mention during my report was also for the forum on Wednesday, we'll be releasing our annual report of the work we've done in the office for the past year.
And Commissioner, just remind us again, where is the forum on Wednesday, and what are the times?
Yep, it's at the Copley Library, the Gustafano Room, Wednesday from 2 to 4.
Okay.
Gustavino Room.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Any second?
Second.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Kyle. Take care.